Yeah. Awesome. Hello, everyone. We are live. Welcome to our third episode of Grace Pace, where I interview cool designers who are also like content creators, founders, focusing on everything outside of the 9 to 5. And I'm really excited to welcome our third guest, my friend Sarah. I've known Sarah for actually a few years. We connected like initially online, and then we also hung out in person in SF, and it was really fun. I think we went hiking up like a mountain.
Yeah.
It was a good vibe. And also during our live, feel free to jump in and ask any questions you want or make any comments in the chat. There is a like 30-second delay between what we see here and what we see on LinkedIn Live.
Okay.
So but we'll try to get through as many questions as we can. And Sarah is a founder and designer focused on climate tech, growth, sustainability, and she also does investing. She founded The Craft, also has a podcast, course, and newsletter, which you should check out. It's all linked in the profile. As a way for folks to trickle in, would love to know where are you all based in and what got you interested in climate tech and investing? What about you, Sarah? Where are you based right now and what got you interested?
Yeah. So currently I'm based in Amsterdam, sometimes in Hawaii. So I just kind of go back and forth. I'll be back home in November. And what got me interested in climate tech? Was that the question?
Yeah.
Okay. Yes, good question. So I've always been kind of keeping tabs on climate. So I read like the IPCC report, and just, kind of keep tabs on what's going on. I've also seen a lot of changes on my island, and we know that islands are, of course, heavily impacted, and you can kind of see the results already. So in certain areas where I'm from on Maui, they've actually moved their roads inland, like they've rebuilt roads because it's starting to get washed away by the ocean because the sea level is rising. And then most recently, we had the Maui fires, which was really, really tragic and very drastic. One of the most fatal wildfires in the US, I think. So I think it's honestly just kind of seeing it around. And then I started my own company a few years ago. And I think in the middle of last year, I actually decided to pivot and focus completely on climate tech, not having any background in it. So we can chat more about that. But yeah, I'll keep it at a high level for now and we can go further into it.
Awesome. Thank you. I see people on LinkedIn, but it's like not showing up in our StreamYard, but that is okay. This is my first time using this. But yeah, like we can get into it.
Yeah.
Yeah, but let's do introductions. Like what's keeping you busy these days?
Yeah, good question. So I have so much going on. Um, so yeah, the craft. So I'm still advising early stage climate tech companies. I'm doing investing personally. And so I know people are interested in hearing more about investing in seed startups or climate tech startups. I'm writing a Substack now, which goes out every Tuesday. I do a deep dive on some sort of topic. It could be related to climate or growth hacking and whatnot. I do see the LinkedIn comments coming through.
Amazing.
So, yeah. Um, and yeah, I have the podcast. The podcast I started working on last year actually, and now we're about to start season 3, which is awesome. We've had really, really incredible guests like Don Norman, and yeah, just so many people on that are really inspirational. So it's been great actually. I think similar to what you said, Grace, where you were saying that you want to use this as an opportunity to like learn from the people that you're talking to. And I felt very much the same about my own podcast. Like, as I'm interviewing people and kind of doing discovery on them and reading their books that they put out and everything, it's like just a massive learning opportunity for me. So I remember one person said, like, would you continue? What was it? Are you enjoying the podcast or something? And I was like, I would keep doing it if nobody listened, just because I'm learning so much. So yeah, it's been really great.
What are some interesting things, something that fascinated you that you learned recently from your podcast
Ooh. Oh, through the podcast.
or in general in life?
Oh my gosh, I don't know where to start. I've been learning more about AI lately, so that's been an interesting topic. Just learning about the climate impact. I think not many people talk about AI in terms of sustainability. Most people are just, talking about, I don't know, different investments that are happening, different products that are coming out with AI, how to use tools, Gen AI, ChatGPT, Claude, that sort of thing. Um, Hello, Ireland. So Yeah, I think my research is a lot more on the sustainability impact. And of course, with companies like Google and Microsoft, we see that the investments that they're doing in AI actually set them back. So achieving the 2030 goal of like net zero or achieving climate goals are going to be very, very difficult if the carbon emissions go up instead of down.
How are the
Yeah.
investments these companies are setting backwards?
Well, so I don't know how familiar people are with the consumption of AI, but AI requires a lot of training in particular is very data intensive. So I wrote an article about this if you'd like to check out my Substack. But I think it was training like ChatGPT 3 was the equivalent of, I want to say 134 households for a year, their annual energy usage for a year in the US. So please don't quote me entirely on that and go read my Substack, but I think it was 134. So we can get an idea, right, of the energy consumption. It's absolutely insane.
Yeah, that's insane. Definitely check it out on her LinkedIn profile and see if some buddies in the chat. Hello, LinkedIn user.
Hey.
Hello, Lucas. Hello, Lay from Ireland. Lay also listened to Sarah's podcast with Don Norm recently. Definitely worth a listen. I would check it out as well. Speaking of investing in AI and setting like taking up so much energy consumption,
Mhm.
how do you balance the often conflicting goals of growth and sustainability?
This is such a good question, Grace, and we can talk for like 3 hours on this. Um, so yes, my background is in growth hacking, and a lot of the research that I've been doing has been on uncovering how companies can grow in a sustainable way. And it involves essentially, and this is something that I teach in my course, decentering growth. And I mean, growth for startups might look different, right, than growth for a corporation. But it's pretty safe to say that most corporations, that like North Star is kind of profit. Of course, they have other probably they have other North Star metrics, but ultimately, most companies are prioritizing profit. But when you have profit at the center of everything, it becomes the goal over people or the planet. And now there's a lot more companies and a lot more traction for sustainability, which is great. And I think sustainability is a lot more broad than we traditionally think about. So essentially, we're thinking more about long term growth. And you can tie that into growth hacking because sometimes growth hacking is sort of misconceived as a marketing knowledge or related to acquisition, perhaps, or even related to not being user centric. I'm curious, what's your perception of growth hacking, Grace?
hmm For me, I think of mostly like people who, I guess, like something that I've experienced every day. Not really a growth hack, but people just like mass
Yeah.
email, mass DM people to check out my
Mm,
product and kind of growth
yeah.
hack it. But there's also other things I do. For example, on my Luma events, I have opt-in if people want to stay updated to more events. That means they want to subscribe to
Yeah.
my newsletter, so it's like a little consent about that. So just like little things like that I do to like grow more to like just like
Right.
acquire more users, retention, and things like that.
Yeah, yeah, that's great. So the director of product design at Meta actually commented on my course announcement the other day where I was talking about how growth is one of the most desirable roles. And he said, 100% agree when I'm hiring people. I do care about UI finesse, paraphrasing here, but I care even more about connecting whatever the design is to the business impact. And so that's essentially what I'm trying to teach with my growth course. Um, but like growth to me is maybe a bit different because I'm teaching it in the sense of the entire life cycle of a customer. So you can think about like there's like the R framework or pirate metric or the growth loop, which is popularized by Reforge, but it's thinking about acquisition, activation, retention, monetization, and referral. And so you're thinking about all of these steps in a customer life cycle with heavy emphasis, in my case, on retention, because retention, if you have a better retention rate over time, is actually more important than acquisition. And I think we spoke about this, but it's sort of like that leaky bucket example that I gave, where if you have a hole in the bottom of your bucket and you are pouring more water into the bucket, it doesn't really matter that you're pouring more water in because it's all coming out anyways. And that's sort of like the example that I give for thinking about acquisition and retention. It's like you need really strong retention, and that's also what I equate to long-term sustainable growth for companies. So it is really putting people at the center. But I think my growth hacking is very untraditional, as you can maybe tell. It's like going beyond that now because we need to think about humanity in general and also the planet as stakeholders in our design process. So it's not just designing for end users.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. Speaking of retention, curious about how can like startups and companies help increase retention and something that's like more sustainable and retaining their users?
Yeah, this is a good question. So, I think the number one reason why startups fail is because they do not talk to their customers. And this seems very simple, but it's something that everyone can do, whether you're like a public corporation or you're a startup with two co-founders. You know what I mean? Like it's, oh, sorry, it's attainable for everyone. So, whether you can do this in a very formalized way, or you're going to do this a little bit more scrappy because you're a smaller company, the number one thing is first to talk to customers, to understand their profile, and to not work on growth until you've found product market fit. So you want to make sure that you're actually attracting the right customer and that there's a market for something before you go into working on growth tactics.
Yeah, so taking a step back, talking to users and making
Yeah.
sure solving the right problem, the right users, and then
Yeah.
kind of going after those people specifically.
Exactly, yeah, and I can give, maybe a tip of something that's really overlooked, I think, is talking to churned customers. So,
Mm,
a lot of times when companies do research, at least the tech companies that I've worked at, they don't often talk to to customers that have churned away from the product, or companies are if it's B2B or B2C, customers that just don't use the product very much and never really reach that aha moment or activation is what we call it in growth. So it's like really making sure you're understanding what the critical points are for the customer. Like if it's support software, maybe it's creating 10 tickets is when you see the value. Like when the customer sees the value of, oh, okay, this is a great product and I think this can really help me solve my problem. Um, so yeah, I think it's like being really intentional about what you need to know and what problem you're trying to solve, and then making sure that you're getting diverse customers' input on that.
and even the ones who churn. I should interview people. I should reach out to people who churn from Design Buddies. Should do
Yeah,
that.
do it.
Yeah, since most of our audience is designers, how can designers help? What can designers do to continue growing their product they're working on, also being more sustainable?
Yes. So, what can designers do to continue growing for themselves, their own career?
Or growing their product, like designers at like Meta or designers working at a
Oh,
startup.
got it. Yeah, I think it's really about knowing what exactly the goal is at a certain moment because retention is obviously important. But if you're an early stage startup, you might have more of a focus on acquisition once you've kind of nailed the retention piece. Like, you know that you have happy customers that are staying, then you might start focusing more on, okay, now we need to build an acquisition team. We need a product designer for acquisition. We need a PM for acquisition, and we need an engineering manager and some engineers. It's like building out a typical team, but it's focused on a certain aspect of growth. um, that being said, what I also like to share is anyone can use growth hacking techniques in their product design process, and it doesn't mean that you need to be a growth designer, that you need to have a growth position. It's really, I think, highly beneficial, and the testimony for that is really like the people who've taken my first two cohorts. They come away, with really actionable things that they can apply growth to, even though they're not in a growth position necessarily. Because, as I explained, growth is really the entire product. So it's like not just acquisition; it's also the entire product experience. Is thinking about the retention experience. It could even be, for example, I think Netflix does this really well. Thinking about when a customer wants to leave you, it's like, is there a way that you can make that customer stay and really understanding why they're leaving and not causing friction? Because you don't want to make it so difficult, like, "You need to call us if you wanna cancel your plan," and then that customer is never gonna come back because they're already put off.
hmm Yeah, think
Yeah.
about the whole process and how you can both acquire and retain customers. Yeah. That's cool. I see some more people. Oh, thank you for linking that, Lay. Hello, Harshal. Excited to be here and learn. Deidre says hello. Amazing. I know there's like a delay on my LinkedIn's like a little bit laggy, so I'm
Uh-oh.
also gonna try. I know some people submitted questions as well. I'll try to go through,
Okay.
but I'm also curious. Like kind of speaking about sustainability and climate tech, what are
Mhm.
some of the latest like advancements that you're excited about in climate tech?
Ooh. I'm gonna be honest, everything feels new to me because I did not do a background in some sort of hard science. I did poli-sci at UC Berkeley, so yeah, no climate background. And a lot of the technologies that I'm investing in now are, me learning how battery storage works or like how heating works, how you can store heat. It's learning about photocatalysis and how you can use mushrooms to destroy garments. Like, there's just so many different things for me that everything is very new. And each investment opportunity that comes across my desk is an opportunity for me to learn about whatever the technology is.
That's awesome. I'm curious, how did you get into investing?
Yeah, good question. So I remember we had this conversation, but I was telling Grace that back when I was in college, I read this book called
Mhm.
Rich Dad Poor Dad by, I think it's Robert Kiyosaki. I think that's correct. And that book, I think you had the same reaction, really changed the way that I thought about money in general. I don't come from a family that is like well off. So I struggled a lot growing up with finances and with money and just had this concept that he talks about in the book, which is like maybe pursuing high education is the way that poor people think about, becoming wealthy. And I also think ultimately we sorry to bounce around here, but we need to actually decenter the idea that money is like the be all end all in our mindset, because I think so many people visualize success at hitting that goal of making a ton of money or having a certain amount. But if you have that mindset, the truth is, in reality, you're almost never satisfied when you're constantly pursuing money as like your measure of success. So,
Mhm.
yeah, anyways, long story short, sorry, Grace. So, yeah, I started investing in the stock market as soon as I started making money. I paid off all my student debt and then I started investing and was able to make pretty good money that way. I never do short-term training. It's always like me really assessing what the long-term growth trajectory of a company looks like and diversifying my portfolio. And yeah, that's been really beneficial for me. And so from there, I was able to use that money to also invest now into seed startups.
That's awesome.
Yeah.
Curious, like, how did you learn how to invest in like startups? Because that's something like I'm personally curious about too, like angel
Yeah.
investing, um, investing with like a different fund, and the whole world
Yeah.
of investing in startups.
Yeah, it's exciting. So I'm not very risk averse, so I'll just do something even if there is a massive risk. Uh, and so I think my approach to things is sort of like baptism by fire, where it's like I'm gonna do it and figure it out, and maybe me like failing will be me learning a lesson that will help me to improve for the future. So yeah, I think it was just that approach where I was like, I'm just gonna figure it out as I go. I did start learning, of course, about climate stuff on my own. So I took some courses with Delft, which is like a really great university here in the Netherlands, just online as I was working. And from there, had like a basic understanding of climate. I also started reading a lot of books. I read a lot in general. Like, I maybe lately I'm reading a book a week, also because I'm reading the books of the guests for the podcast. Um, and then, yeah, I think it was just joining this group called Climate Insiders that I invest through. And so we're investing specifically in climate tech seed startups. And each opportunity that comes across my desk is that opportunity to learn more about the technology specifically. But in addition to that, I think it's sort of the things we spoke about, like really evaluating the founders carefully because investors tend to heavily index on the founders and the founder match and the founder technology match and all of that. But it's also just understanding like where is the technology at, particularly for hardware. That's something that's entirely new to me. So it's like looking at the technology readiness level, which is the TRL, um, and yeah, just really making sure that you're making a good assessment. And that assessment, the points that you're looking at for all startups across the board is similar. But I think you also need to have this mindset of I'm going to lose money, period. And so it's more about diversifying and planting seeds as much as possible everywhere so that, one seed becomes that unicorn or that decacorn.
Hmm. Yeah, founders look at technology readiness, product market fit, just planting
Yes,
seeds and learning like learning the fundamentals through taking courses and reading books, but
exactly.
also learning in context, like get a new startup and look into the technologies for that.
Yeah, a great summary. And yeah, if you want, I told Grace that I'm creating a draft right now in Substack. So if you want to see images that would help with any of this, then yeah, let me know.
Yeah, do you want to share that?
We can.
Yeah.
Yeah, let me pull it
Yeah.
up.
Yeah.
So this is, hang on, this is the one I did today. So this is
Mhm.
just generally giving maybe an overview on climate. And so yeah, in today's Substack, I wrote about why invest in climate tech now. So of course, the trend that we've seen, sorry guys, I just have to say a disclaimer. This is not investment advice. So this is just me sharing my experience. If you want investment advice, then please talk to a wealth advisor. But anyways, so basically the climate tech market is doing really well. And even though we've had a downturn sort of over the past 2 years, climate tech has still been more resilient. So the returns are higher and it's more resilient. The investment in the EU, which might be interesting for people in the EU, is also growing over time. So it's like this mustard color is Europe. And typically the US has always been very dominant when it comes to VC. But the EU, when it comes to climate, is really growing on par with that. So yeah, there's lots of stuff here, but I wanted to go into this guy, I think. Yeah, so um, technology readiness level is a way to evaluate particularly hardware companies. And this actually came from NASA, which is funny, like when they were building engines, how they assessed like the level that that technology was at. But anyways, with NASA, it took 25 years to go from TRL 1 to 9. And so hopefully this image gives you some idea. But the goal when you're investing in seed stage startups is to invest early, but not so early that it's not ready for commercialization. So you're looking at that 5 to 7 range where the technology uh, is ready for commercialization, but it's not yet competitive or too expensive.
Hmm.
So
How,
hopefully that helps.
so like to assess whether
Yeah.
they're ready, do you look at like research papers that proven the technology they're using works, or how do you know it's
Not
ready?
not even necessarily. Yeah. I mean, typically my process is like starting with understanding how the technology works, right? Because there's like a lot of deep tech stuff that I just don't have a background in, and a lot of the founders they've done like their PhD in this, for example, and it's like what their entire studies has been on. So for me, it's first understanding how the technology works. It's understanding so the founders, when you invest, you get like this long background on the company basically, which helps me understand where they're at and also what the USP is. So for example, with heating technology, that startup might be able to store heat at a higher level, for example, than a competitor startup. So it's like really looking at where the tech is and also what is unique about this startup and why are the founders the right people to execute on the idea.
Hmm.
I think that's important because what you'll also see with startups is that a lot of times companies will invest because of VCs will invest because of the founders. So there's a lot of great companies that exist right now where the product that they started with is not the product that they ended with. Like Slack, I think, started as something completely different. So it's like being able to take the bet on the founders and their ability to execute over what the idea is.
Always pivot. Yeah, people are always pivoting. I've
Yeah,
definitely pivoted
exactly.
a lot as well. That's
Yeah.
cool. Do you ever want to build a climate tech startup?
I did think about it. Yeah. So I was looking more into, I think here I like list out actually Y Combinator has really great list on all the areas that could really use, I think I put it here. Um
Mm.
could really use just like people creating startups in that area to solve problems, right? Because climate tech ultimately is like the problem of all problems. And there's so many different areas that need work and that need to change because it touches on basically everything that humans do. So it could be carbon capture and storage, accounting, clean energy, proteins. We've seen like bug proteins. That's definitely come across. Yeah, so it's like thinking about how people are using bugs as a form of protein instead. Really interesting. Were you gonna say
Yeah.
something, Grace?
No, I thought that was interesting. It's like, is it like kind of like the Impossible Burger where people like don't farm like cows instead? Because I know cows, they are not like the methane and
They
the
produce,
grass and
yeah,
the
a lot of
water. It
methane.
takes a lot of
Yeah.
water to like produce like a burger, but like
Yeah.
less for like bug protein. Is that in the context of that?
Yes. So bugs are a lot more sustainable than cows for sure. And it's, I think for people in the West, sort of like, I don't know if I want to eat bugs, you know? But I think it's growing. And, here, when I go to like the pet store for Kuma, there's dog food now that's made out of bug protein, like insect protein. Yeah. So
What
it's
kind of
definitely a growing
insects?
industry. Yeah, I'm not
Oh.
I'm not sure. I've actually he's very spoiled. I've actually started cooking him like, yeah, I don't know, boiled chicken or like fresh food, which is also not good. Where is he?
Kuma's your dog?
Um, yeah, I think he's here somewhere. He's probably hiding under a pillow. But yeah, we did try the bug protein and I don't think he liked it, to be honest.
I see he likes the chicken more.
Yeah, I'll get him like fish dog food. Like it's like, fish dog food. So, yeah.
Hmm.
But
Nice.
yeah, so I did consider doing tracking and I did research on it. But there's already some really great companies doing that, like Watershed. And there's a company here in the Netherlands that does that. And so I just decided there's already solutions to this. So I'm not going to focus on it.
Hmm. Cool. Yeah, basically everything
Yeah,
humans touch, from like what they consume, how they get around,
exactly.
how they build houses, like basically everything. There's something
Yeah,
that can be
everything.
done to make it more sustainable.
Right, which is why it's so relevant to all of us. And I mean, they estimate like that the climate tech industry is going to be, I think it's like 1.5 trillion by 2025.
Hmm.
So, yeah,
Wow.
it's a massive, massive industry.
Hmm. I'm
Yeah.
also curious, like you mentioned investing focus on like seed stage startups. Curious why seed stage and what is is it like high risk, high returns or curious
Yes,
yeah, more about
exactly. You
that.
nailed it. Yeah.
Hmm.
So seed is Uh, I guess you could say maybe a little bit more risky, but the idea is, as Grace said, to invest early and see really high returns. Um, so I pulled up, I don't know, maybe this is interesting. This is like an example of what your returns might look like. Um, so if you invest like 2K, let's say, and it becomes a decacorn, you might make almost like $500,000, for example. Um, so yeah, I don't know if this is interesting or too much, but
No, this
generally,
is cool.
okay. So each time you invest, it gets diluted by about 20%. So these are approximate numbers just to give you an idea of what this could look like, but it's based on real data. So this is just an example. And so the
Mhm.
idea is that you invest in like, let's say 20 different startups in a year. And the idea is that, and maybe this image will help. I think I threw an image somewhere here of the power law. Here we go. So 90% of all exit profits come from less than 10% of companies. So if that's 10,000 startups a year. So the idea is that you plant seeds, as many as possible, right? 2,000, 2,000, 2,000, something like that. And then let's say like one of those becomes a decacorn, and then your profit could be like 500,000. And when you compare that to the stock market, so obviously it's high risk, I first of all should say, because you're probably going to lose a lot of money that you've invested. But of course it's similar to VC. So I do angel investing, just to be clear. It's similar to VC where you're just looking for that like one unicorn to make back your profits that you lost. So that's sort of the idea.
Mhm.
So you can see like the top 10 companies driving the 2024 Midas list. It's like all companies that we know. So the gold standard is like that you invested in these during the seed stage. And now you're like super happy because you're seeing all your returns.
Mhm. Yeah, I should start planting seeds. So you just need like 2K to do like a seed round and then it could potentially return like
Yeah.
500,000.
Yeah, I think that's what could be interesting for people too is I get some questions about angel investing and I think a lot of people kind of have the response, well, I'm not going to do angel investing because I don't have the money for that. But people working in the Bay Area and tech are like the 1% essentially. So we're the people that should put our money towards changing the direction for our future.
Mhm.
And so putting that into climate tech, for example, the best way to really, yeah, make that change, I think, is to actually put your money into it to invest for the future. Um, yeah, hopefully this is helpful.
Yeah, this is. Like I like kind of want to get into angel investing one day as well. Maybe soon. Let's see.
Yeah, but yeah, to your point, Grace, like different. If you might invest on your own, or you might be part of a different group that does investing. Uh, it depends really what the minimum requirement is per deal. But there are, it is possible to do like 1,000 or 2,000, and that might be like the minimum investment for a deal
Hmm.
through angel investing specifically.
Yeah. Do you usually angel invest through like a group? I know there's like groups out there, people or like just single
Yeah.
person.
Yeah, it's a good question. So, I started angel investing by myself, so I was just doing it not yet into climate, and I invested in companies like Mercury,
Ooh.
and so that was just kinda on my own. Mercury is like a bank that I use, it's
Mhm.
really great if you have a business, and from there, I really wanted to do climate specifically, and I think a lot of, proponents of investing in climate will say that hardware is really the area that you want to invest, even though it could be seen as more tricky than software. And so I found this group that does investing in that called Climate Insiders. The founder is Johan Berno. A lot of these resources, this resource actually is from him. So yeah, he puts together some great stuff and he vets the deals. So it's not just me saying like, um, I want to invest in this photocatalysis process or something. I want to invest in this mushroom company. Uh, that definitely helps.
Hmm. Yeah, so it's kind of investing in products that you know you're comfortable with, but also joining groups to find out about new tech that you might not be as familiar with, but to learn more about the technology, like hardware.
Exactly. Yeah. And I think just generally, like the way that I tend to learn things is by just kind of inundating my brain with it. So I'll read books on it, I'll listen to podcasts, I'll just kind of like nonstop be consuming information about it. And that's sort of what I do right now. So generally learning a lot about climate tech and more about VCs because I was not very familiar with VCs or how VCs thought when I started this journey um, last year. And now I'm learning much more about how VCs think. And it's very interesting because when you work at tech companies as an employee, uh, you do not particularly think, wow, the founder is so important to the outcome of this company. I think we're a lot more as designers focused on product. But it's
Hmm.
interesting to see how VCs think because it's actually, I think, quite different from employees.
How do VCs think that differ from employees?
So I think it really is this that they index very heavily on the founder
Hmm.
um, in software and hardware. I think when it comes to hardware, then there's also this technology readiness level that I spoke about. So there's different ways of kind of assessing, but yeah, generally I would say the thing that mm, not surprised me because I knew that, but the thing that is almost at odds with being an employee is sometimes you work at a tech company and you're like, um, really indexing very heavily on the product or new features or things that went wrong or customers being upset about a new payment planner. It's like you're more in the weeds, so you have that perspective. But when you're a VC or even an angel investor investing, you're very heavily looking at the founders and if they have grit, if they have, in this case, if they're a subject matter expert. So there have been deals that we've turned down because the person didn't have a clear tie to the technology. So if they, studied something completely different than the tech that they're partnering on, let's say the co-founder has a PhD in whatever that subject is, but they have nothing to do with it really. They just kind of lift right out. That might give someone pause and say, I don't know if this is a good co-founder fit even, because you also want to make sure that the founders are complementary. So you might have one person who's more technical or one person who's more business savvy, and those complement each other very well. But you might also, in this case, for me, have like two technical founders, and that's also normal.
Mm. Looking at founders, yeah, I remember like when I was looking at a company, I didn't really think about the founders too much. But
Yeah.
now in the startup world, I was like, I like meeting other founders, and yeah, something I'll take a look at more. I will
Mhm.
get to some questions soon from all the comments, but I'm curious on topic of investing, what are some changes you hope to see in the world?
I think this is an interesting question because it touches on uh like hope is nice, but I like action. So lately I've been hearing the term techno optimist a lot, and I would like to call myself a techno intentionalist because it's not just about like this like fluffy hopes and prayers concept, but it's like what are we all doing right now in order to actually implement that change, right? Because the change is not just going to happen. We have to cause it to happen, right? So I think that's sort of the approach I take, and it's like this is my intention with doing what I do, but I also think it's sometimes people feel like um how should I say this? Almost like they're solely responsible or something, like I think I made a post and a guy was like, "Well, I can't quit my job." And I was like, "Whoa, no one's asking you to quit your job. Like there are so many ways that you can contribute to climate action, or maybe your topic isn't even climate. Maybe you're really passionate about accessibility and there's a way that you can contribute to that." So it's like, I mean, who listening thinks that they can solve climate change by themselves, you know? I don't think a single person would raise their hand. And so it's like we all really need to work together. We're in a system, right? This is an ecosystem and we all have a part to play. And when we shift ourselves, we fundamentally change the system that we're in.
Hmm. Yeah, I don't need to like go and quit your job. Anyone can get started, take small steps,
Yeah, right.
and go forward with that. Yeah, I'm going to take some questions from the comments. Let me just read through. So I'll just go through in order. Tandra asks, can you recommend some resources for UX designers to learn more about growth hacking?
Yes. So I actually have this in some of the emails that I sent out, but there's a book on growth hacking that's considered a classic. I'm just gonna Google it so I give you the right information. It's by Sean Ellis. Sorry, one sec. Growth hacking. Yes. Okay. So it's by Morgan Brown and Sean Ellis, and it's called Hacking Growth: How Today's Fastest Growing Companies Drive Breakout Success. So this is like a classic book that I really like. Um, and other than that, if y- so there's different resources. You can check out like growth.design, which ties growth a little bit more into actually UI implementation and psychology, I would say. There's my course, which is more like a broad overview of growth and how to heavily index on sustainable growth. And I also have like a framework for teaching beyond the end user. So it's like not just thinking about end users anymore and business goals. It's like, how do we really think about this as a holistic ecosystem where everything that we do has an impact, right? Um, so if you work at Amazon, you're not just thinking about the person buying the book. You're thinking about the truck drivers. You're thinking about the environment, So it's like really who are the stakeholders and how do we affect the system? Um, Another resource I would recommend that's a little bit heavier, so I think you kind of need some growth background, is Reforge, and that's also like a really incredible resource by industry leaders in growth hacking, but it's definitely a bit heavier. Like it's probably more geared towards PMs.
Hmm. Is Reforge? It's like a series. It's like a program.
Yeah, I think they've changed the model. So now I think it's an annual membership fee, and you get access to all of their courses, and they have artifacts. So they put out a lot of industry leading content because they have teachers that have worked at like all the top tech companies.
Hmm. That's very
Yeah.
cool. I check some of those out. I'm interested in growth as well. So Sandali ask, what areas of sustainability do you feel like we should focus on top of the stuff you mentioned about AI? I feel like it's like kind of
On
everything.
top of AI. Yeah, it's tricky. I mean, I think ultimately you should focus on what you're interested in, like what gets you
Mhm.
excited. And maybe that starts with doing a general overview in order to figure out what you actually care about. But I do think in general, what all designers, um, if all designers understood this, it would be great for emissions, is that digital has a physical component always. So just because we are product designers and UX designers creating digital products doesn't mean that we are not emitting carbon. And you can measure like your website or your product, whatever it is, your platform, how much you're emitting, and think about how you're designing in a way where you're considering your emissions. So if you use WebP, that's going to be better than PNG or JPEG. Using a lot of video is obviously not good. It's better to use GIFs or illustrations. So really thinking through like all those little decisions. And yeah, I think making sure that you're using a data center that's powered on renewable energy, for example. But in general, it would be helpful for more people to understand that AI is very, um, it consumes a lot of energy. And I have an
Mhm.
article about this in my Substack. So yeah, especially Gen AI and training AI in particular is like really, really setting companies back. And it's a shame because a lot of companies kind of hop on this hype bandwagon. Like one AI product comes out, and then every company is like moving their teams to work on some AI feature that they want to market as AI when a lot of companies were already using AI. You know what I mean? So it's like, I think as an industry, we need to be more thoughtful and not just jump on this hype bandwagon without thinking through the consequences of our actions.
Mhm. Oh yeah, that definitely happened to me at my
Yeah,
former job. It's like
really.
AI, everyone was like, "We're gonna win the AI race or whatever." It's kind of crazy.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah, it's silly. I also question like sometimes with the technology we build, like obviously I'm very pro technology, but I also think we need to be thoughtful about what we build in terms of how it helps humans and not, um, yeah, not that it kind of like runs ahead of us without how to say this. Sometimes people are just creating technology without thinking through any of the consequences. So I do
Mhm.
think we need to be very thoughtful about what we create and why and how it's actually making our lives better.
Mhm. Yeah, agreed. And also like better for like next generations and so the human
Yeah,
species can
exactly.
continue and stuff.
Right, because when we're doing things like every company, every tech company in the world creating an AI product, which is going to consume a lot of energy, and companies are already struggling to have enough data centers, and not all data centers are powered on renewable energy, and they consume a ton of fresh water. And I think like 2% of the world's water is fresh water. Like it just, yeah, so many problems, you know? So I think, yeah, it's about really understanding that and not just diving into something without understanding what the impact will be.
And also blockchain is something that takes up a lot of energy as well, too. That's to
Yes.
consider. hmm Um, next question. I guess yeah, I guess like what are some design opportunities in climate tech? Like, I
Yes.
guess like kind of
Um,
yeah, go ahead.
you can absolutely work in climate tech as a product designer. There's a girl I interact with on LinkedIn who just did that switch. So really exciting. I think she found me because she was interested in climate tech, and then she specifically looked in her interview process for climate tech companies. There's a bunch of climate tech companies hiring product designers. And I would also say that sometimes the concern I get when people are pivoting into climate tech is they're like, well, I don't have, the domain knowledge, whether it's climate in general or energy in general, or it's like specific to that company. But you don't actually need that because a lot of people, especially at these early stage climate tech startups, are the domain expert. Like they've done years of research in that and they've created the technology. And what they actually need is someone who understands how to do design thinking or how to create product led growth. They need people with the skills that you have, and not the skills that they have, because that's why they're hiring.
Yeah, design thinking,
Yeah.
product-led growth, ways you can contribute, and climate tech as a designer, and in visual design too. Mhm. Harshal asks, how important is it for you as an investor to see a strong design focus in the startups you invest in, especially those balancing growth with sustainability? Like, ooh, design.
Yes, this is a very interesting question. Thank you, Harshal. So, this is fascinating because most startups do not have a designer. Most startups, even in climate tech, have like 10 engineers or technical people and no designer. And so that's sort of what you see. And when I started advising, I thought like I was going to specifically focus a little bit more on product design. And what I realized is they actually could generally use help also on like product management or, the startups are so small that it's an all hands on deck situation, but they can really use design thinking. Sometimes I feel like design gets boxed into UI, which is something that we talk about all the time. But um, I was in Japan for, like, a skiing trip reading, like I just sat in the airport library and read, like, Harvard Business Review, and they were talking about design thinking, but it was framed in the context of business, and it just makes you realize, like, how much, maybe a business or a founder are using design techniques, but they don't think of it as design. Uh, so yeah, hopefully that's clear, but it's like they don't have a design focus or a designer. And what can really benefit a lot of these startups is actually understanding how to think using these frameworks from Silicon Valley that like we commonly use in tech because maybe they came from a PhD in academia and they have a like their background is being at a university. So it's like finding a way to bring these together in a really complementary way, and guiding them through a design process that involves heavy UX research, for example, to get them started in the earlier stages. And then, depending on if they have software or hardware, you're going to have like a certain focus. But with the clients that I have advised specifically, what I've seen is, which is like quite normal for very young startups, just a bit chaotic. And they need a little bit more guidance around how to conduct customer research in a way that brings valuable insights and outcomes that shape the product market fit.
Yeah, so it's like
Yeah.
essentially founders who talk to users, who do some research, ship like MVPs and keep iterating from there and follow like design process.
Yeah, so they do benefit from a design process, but yeah, I think this is why VCs heavily index on the founder. The ability to pivot is very important, and if they can't, because probably they didn't talk to customers, then they're probably gonna fail. So, I've been in situations where I've done UX research for a climate, tech startup, and it uncovered something that was fundamentally mismatched with the way that the startup was perceiving what the customer wanted, and resulted in a different product, like a shift in what the product was.
hmm Yeah. I feel like as an investor, sometimes like you have the opportunity to like kind of contribute to the company as well, like helping them out, like doing visa research or consulting and stuff, because you want them to succeed.
Yeah, exactly. I think that's really specific to VCs.
Mm-hmm.
I think what's more common with angel investing is that you can sign your check and then wave goodbye until you hear
Yeah.
from them in the IPO or when they get acquired. But yeah, it depends, of course. My relationship has been different because I do advise some of the clients that I invest in. And that's been really incredible because they know that you have skin in the game and you want them to succeed.
hmm Kind of going, I'm curious, like when you reach out to these like companies, um, is it mostly like people you know and like do you kind of like just write them a check and like put it like sign a term sheet and then just
Yeah.
until I say an IPO, like
So the climate tech investments that I do are through Climate Insiders, which means that like I don't go get leads, right? Like I just don't have time to do that because I'm working and the newsletter and the podcast and whatnot. So it's really helpful in that sense being part of a group, which is why if you're interested in angel investing, you might consider starting as a part of a group. That way you don't have to vet your own investments basically. So yeah, it helps to have someone who's like well positioned, who has a background in VC, who has knowledge on climate. And yeah, from there, it's kind of a founder call. So we get on a call with the founders, and it's an opportunity to ask them questions beyond the information that's already given. So I'm trying to think if I can pull up like I won't share this, but I could walk you through like what information might be given.
Hmm.
Let me see if I can pull it up. So, yeah, basically, you get information around the deal. So, the demand, the competitive edge, the growth potential, what the founders' backgrounds are, what the environmental impact is, what their exit strategy is, the timing. You get like info around the finances, like if it's like what kind of round it is, the size, the valuation, that sort of information that I, yeah, can't quite share. And then, yeah, it's just a lot around the USP, the market opportunity, the market size is also very important. That's something that investors will look at, especially VCs. Like, how big is the problem and how many people can this reach?
Hmm. That is cool. I'm gonna start asking people those questions.
Yeah, you should. Yeah.
Yeah, I hang out with a bunch of founders as well, and I'm always like asking a lot of questions. I'm just curious
Okay.
overall as a founder
Did
myself
they raise
too.
money? Because, like, as a founder, you can also bootstrap.
Yeah, I'm completely. I actually like at one point I was actually earlier this year. I feel like living in San Francisco, a lot of people make raising VC money sound so sexy, and and I succumbed to that mindset as well without really thinking too much about it because like ooh it sounds cool.
Yeah.
Because like so like at one point earlier this year I was trying to like I have co-founders we were trying to build like a venture scale business. We were trying to go to YC, apply to a bunch of like accelerators and stuff. And then I
Yeah.
don't know, I was just like I decided to do a merger with Design Buddies with my other founder doing his
Mhm.
business with the design educational program. Basically like I feel like we decided to bootstrap from there because we are already profitable. So I feel
Mhm.
like raising VC is like a tool that you
Mhm.
can use
Yeah.
or you can choose not to use. It is helpful in some cases.
Yeah.
Yeah. But yeah, I was there at that point. But I'm still interested about the
Yeah.
VC world. I feel like there's a lot of cool startups out there that I also want to
Right.
support.
Yeah, I think that's a good point that you bring up. You don't need to raise money. If you can bootstrap, then bootstrap, you know? It's as you said, a tool that helps you innovate when you need that financial backing and you don't have it. And some things do require a lot of upfront investment, especially hardware technology.
And like
Yeah.
biotech and that cool
Yeah.
stuff.
Yeah. What's really interesting is like a lot of the investments that I come across, they end up not raising seed when a typical startup might raise seed, because they need the money, but they'll have some sort of grant either from, like, a government or a nonprofit. There's a lot more grants now, from, like, the energy department or, just yeah, it could be a corporation or a nonprofit, but trying to support this transition, the climate transition, and so it's a little bit easier, I would say, for climate tech companies to get grants that can help kickstart them.
Hmm. Yeah, I'm also curious to learn more about you all. Like, if anyone is working in climate, wanting to start a climate tech company, comment down below. I know we have like 4 minutes left, but I would love to learn more about like your, and then have you promote what you're working on as well. Like, you talk a bit about your podcast, newsletter, and course, and
Yeah.
how can people learn more about it? What made you want to start it? How's it
Mhm.
going? What is your goals with all the content you're creating?
Yes, so with the podcast, I think the idea was really I'm going to learn in public, basically. I wanted to make this transition, as I said, like mid last year, which is when I started working on the podcast and the Substack and everything. Um, and I didn't know anything about like investing in climate or, I mean, I don't want to say anything. I knew some things, but certainly not enough or like anywhere near what someone working in that field would know, let's say. So, yeah, this was sort of like my call to action for anyone who is really interested or invested in a cause whether that's climate change or something else that's very special to you. Like, I don't know, maybe you have a neurodivergent sibling and you're like very focused on that, or whatever it is. That like you can make a change and you have the power to take action, and it doesn't need to be something huge and drastic in the beginning, but it can be more like a snowball effect, you know? So it's like, get interested, do your research, discover, start the thing, start learning about it, and just figure out what you can do. And that's been the process with my podcast and Substack. So it's my opportunity to do a lot of heavy research, to talk to subject matter experts. I just had Gaia Harrington on the podcast. This is not out yet, but it will be out for season 3, which is coming. And she really inspired a lot of my work and my course because she did research during her time at Harvard, which was like her thesis on growth and how if we continue growth as usual, it's called business as usual, then we will see a collapse in a decade. And so it's like we literally cannot keep going the way that we're going. We have to, well, we don't have to make a change. We could keep doing what we're doing, but then we're going to see this forced collapse. And that means a collapse in resources as well. So it's like our well being as humans. Or we can have an intentional decentering of growth where we're, operating our businesses in this new way. And we're not just thinking about end users or profit or business goals, but it's really thinking about the impact that we're having on the ecosystem. And yeah, so I have her on the podcast for season 3, which is really exciting. But yeah, her research and like the things that we spoke about was also really inspiring. Yeah, I think it's just really a journey of doing what interests me and what ties into like the change that I want to see in the world and how we can make that actionable. Because when I started this journey, I felt like no one was talking about climate. And especially, you hear a lot of scientists, 1.5 degrees Celsius, blah, blah, but it's like, that doesn't mean anything to people. So we need to change the narrative and we need to tell people in a way that matters to them, but also gives them like, hey, here's what you can do about it. So you're not just saying, you're the problem. Sometimes I think people can take this from the climate messaging. It's like, we have this massive problem and you're a part of it, but I'm not going to tell you what to do about it. And so my piece is really coming in and saying, here's how we're going to change like our design process, how we invest, where we put our money in order to like shift this in the right direction.
Hmm. Yeah,
Yeah.
learning in public. I love that.
Yeah.
That's what I'm doing this as well because I love like talking to
Yeah.
people and learning in public, and hopefully other people can benefit from this knowledge as well. Yeah,
What got
no,
you
great.
interested in investing, and like why did you want to dive more into this topic specifically?
Yeah, because I feel like as a designer, I'm always like curious about technology and like building stuff, and
Mhm.
I also feel like being in SF, being in like the VC, like having friends in VC, having startups in VC, I feel like it's
Yeah.
like cool because like I also read Rich Dad Poor Dad, and that's when I knew I wanted more assets and than liabilities. And I
Yeah.
started like doing stock market research. I went on a whole rabbit hole. I just feel like there's like so much numbers I had to
Mhm.
know, and I'd rather spend my time diving into like technologies and areas and
Yeah.
industries that I'm curious about, not just like looking at stock market data and numbers and analyses.
Mhm.
So that's what got me interested in like investing in startups and also investing in my own skills and taking investing like kind of like myself too, so I can build design
Yeah.
buddies and stuff. But yeah, I just like feel like I just want to have this investing as an opportunity to like learn more, actually have stake in the game and contribute to causes that I'm personally curious about.
Yeah, I love that. I think, yeah, we have a very similar attitude when it comes towards like learning in public, reaching out to people, right? Doing the research and yeah, just pursuing what we're interested in.
That's so awesome. Is there anything else you'd like to share with our buddies today, um, before we end, or any like other
Yeah.
life learnings you want to share?
Let me tell you. No, I'm just kidding. um, yeah, I think, well, I wanted to share for my course, like a special discount with Grace's community. So I gave that to Grace,
Mhm.
and it's her name. But yeah, other than that, I would just say, what would I say? That's a good question. I would say that like, you're so capable, and I think a lot of us have more power than we know, but we sort of hold ourselves back, or we doubt, or we need someone else to affirm us. But I think it's important to not wait for someone to give you permission. So instead of waiting for your employer, your manager, your coworker to give you permission, if you're an employee or, um, just do the thing. Uh, if you bring value to an organization, whether you're employed or whether you're an entrepreneur or if you're doing this as a side hustle, then like, yeah, it's just more power to you, right? Like you're not going to be um you're not going to be the most actualized version of yourself if you're waiting for other people to tell you what to do or give you permission. And I think this is valid for, I mean, obviously I'm an entrepreneur and Grace is an entrepreneur, so maybe our perspective is a little bit different, but you know, some people want to be a 9 to 5 employee and that's what makes them happy and that's great. Like you just need to know who you are and what works for you. But even as an employee, the employees that I think provide the most value to a company are the ones that don't limit themselves to their role, their title, the tasks that they were assigned to do. It's like just be curious and figure out where you can have an impact and do it.
Hmm. Live
That's
life.
my closing message.
Yeah, I love that. Live life asking for forgiveness instead of asking for permission and
Yeah.
taking risks.
Don't ask
Yeah.
for forgiveness. Just do it now.
Yeah, just do it. Just do it. As long as it's not harmful. Like I just yeah,
Right.
that's why I do everything I do today. I just kind of just like do it and then see what happens.
Yeah, exactly. And I think we need to reframe the way that we see failure because failure actually just directs you towards the right thing, right? So if you didn't fail, then you'd probably just be lost. Like failure helps startups figure out how to pivot. It helps people figure out maybe a job that they didn't like, what they're not looking for in a company. So yeah, failure is just ultimately a learning lesson.
Hmm. Definitely agree. No losses here, only learnings.
Yeah, exactly.
Awesome. Well, thank you so much for your time. I will send a follow-up email with a discount on Sarah's course and any links that we reference and hope y'all slay your day with no cap and big facts. So I kept saying that in Skibbity Riz. Um, I have some friends who initiated me in the Gen Alpha lingo, so I
Oh god.
cannot get it out of my mouth.
Are you're a millennial or Gen
I'm
Z?
Gen Z. I'm like between
Okay.
like
Oh,
millennial and Gen
shit.
Z.
Okay.
Yeah.
Yeah. Yeah,
Or
I'm
sometimes I
like
pretend I'm a Gen
borderline.
Alpha. Hmm.
Yeah.
Yeah. So I don't know. I just feel like I can like be either. I could either be like Gen
Mm.
Alpha, Gen Z, or millennial, and yeah.
What do you relate to most? Sorry,
I
I'm
feel like
dragging the
Gen.
conversation.
Yeah, no worries. I feel like Gen Z because I also like don't really see. I feel like Gen Z is very like entrepreneurial and wants like self-starters.
Yeah.
And that is what I relate to, and just more open mind. Like I guess millennials are pretty open minded and self starters too, not to generalize, but
Mhm.
I just feel like when Gen Zs enter the workplace, they like stopped following like the traditional standards a lot. They started like questioning and changing the norms,
Yeah.
and I feel like I identify a lot with that because that's what I did, and then later I just like
Mhm.
hopped off the corporate ladder.
Yeah, same. Yeah, very
Yeah.
similar paths, so I get that. Yeah.
What
There are
about
certain
you?
words though where I'm like, I don't know if I can say that.
I know. There's like
The
big facts,
slang.
no cap, skibbity riz,
No cap.
mewing, phantom
Mm.
tax, Nostra alpha.
Yeah, I will not be saying skibbity riz. You will not catch me say that.
Dude, I've been having so much fun, like yelling skibbity riz to random people. And they're like, "What are you doing?" I'm like, "Skibbity Ohio riz."
No cap?
Big facts for real, for real. On God,
Yeah, riz.
mewing.
All right.
Giga Chad.
Well,
Yeah.
yeah.
Thank you so much for your time today.
Thank you so much for having me on, and thank you for hosting this for everyone. Like, I joined your talk with Jeremy, and you have like such incredible guests, and I'm really excited to see where this takes you and to continue following your journey. So, yeah, thank you so much for organizing this, for handling the technology for me, and making it easy. And yeah, I really appreciate this chat.
Yeah, I appreciate it. Thank you so much for your time
Yeah.
and sharing your knowledge with myself and everyone watching. All right. Bye, everyone. I'm a
Awesome.
carrot.
Bye.
Sustainable vegetables. Has a face on it. There you go.
It's very cute. I actually got a similar one
Oh.
for Kuma, my dog.
Mm. All right. Bye, everyone.
Bye.
All right.